All right, welcome to the stream. We're going to get back into our sci-fi alien containment unit. So without further ado, we will hop straight into it here. All right. So we've got the containment unit here. Let's just turn some of these lines off a little bit. And we will talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. Welcome everybody in chat. So last week we were roughing things out, getting an idea of what things will look like in there, and excuse me. And just really kind of going through some iterations to see what kind of shapes we could produce. And you know, it's really good for concept artists to be doing these kinds of things, as it's definitely going to be, you know, what you're going to be doing for a client, right? You want to collaborate with them. And so that's where we were. We liked, well, I liked the sort of dome shape, or the sphere, the faceted sphere. And so we started to kind of rough in what some of those shapes would be. Welcome, welcome. I'm doing good today. Thank you for asking. So we were at this state last week, and for myself, the geometric drawing of this dome is important to get correct. I had roughed it out to my best ability, with sketchy lines. I did go and do a little bit of research on what the domes could look like in terms of geometric forms on the internet, and I came across a let's actually talk about what that is. It's a truncated icosahedron, and I've never heard of that before, but that's what we've got going on here. So so I've got that as a visual aid. And just to talk a little bit about visual aids, you're going to use these things when you're drawing a lot of the times to save time. I could go in there and draw straight lines with a ruler, just like you do on pencil and paper. In Photoshop, I'd use the Shift key to create straight lines. So we can look at kind of what that means. You know, just grab another layer, click, hold Shift, click again. That'll draw a straight line between those 2 points. So I could go through and do that kind of thing, or I could find geometric shapes that can just cut to the chase for me to produce the work. Because I'd rather spend my time getting into detailing the object rather than spending a lion's share of my time making the form look geometrically perfect or mathematically perfect. So we've got this bad boy here, and I've kind of seated it within the space that I was looking at before. So so that works for me. And then I didn't quite trace the frame lines within the structure in here. I traced outside of them because we wanted our containment unit to maybe feel a little bit beefier than these. I'm just going to get rid of that old layer. Than these skinny lines that we're seeing in the truncated icosahedron. So you see something that basically comes across like that. So the frame is a lot meatier, right? That can be something that we work with in there. I straightened it up a little bit. What you'll notice in the original is it's kind of tilted. I like that angularity to it, but I feel like in a government facility or whatever, there's going to be very kind of symmetrical, clinical, and square, let's say. So I opted for something like this because I think that'll just be a better representation of it. And instead of it bursting out of one of these or the top, I might actually have it burst out the side, you know, at that point. And so we can work with it in there. I'm going to have it sunken down into that frame shape that we see down there. So if we take this off, we can go back to that original drawing, and I'll just throw down a mask to get rid of the old drawing. Not deleting it, but we're just masking it out. And then we can maybe see what our new drawings will look like set up in there. So that's a little bit better for me, in my opinion. That works quite well. So the only other things that we might do here, there's a couple different options that we can work with. Either there's these kind of cables moving into the cylindrical shape in the ground. It could be that the alien creature, maybe this thing's suspended in this kind of water pool or something, and the creature's arms coming up out of it. That might actually be really fun. And then instead of the cables coming in there, we can have the cables maybe coming to one of these hexagonal openings with maybe a contraption on it or of some sort, which might be fun. So we will go from there, get into it. So I'm just going to change my settings on the I gotta zoom way out on my chat because it's way too close. There we go. Hi Brandon, hi Chris. It looks like the holograms in Ratchet and Clank. Nice. Are you going to add this to your portfolio when this is all fully rendered? Maybe, if I want. Not too worried about that at the moment. Any artwork obviously can be added to the portfolio, right? So this may, if this is a beautiful piece, maybe we get it in there, right? So let's throw on some music and let's tuck into it, shall we? Let's put some of that up there. All right. So what to start with in here? I think that I like the idea of there being kind of like this water we can maybe barely see, or it might be that the ring in the floor is a little bit bigger. So maybe what we can do on that layer is just scale everything up a bit. Kind of place it in the floor like that. And then we can move these guys down inside of that, maybe. I just want to make it feel like there's more room for our visualization to happen. So we'll seat it right there. I'm imagining we'll probably lose the base of that. It'll look like it's kind of sticking up out of the water. And we can have some lights maybe coming out of there, which will be pretty cool. So I'll have to redraw those rings again, but that's fine. We want to kind of start hammering out the details of our drawings. Okay, so let's rough out some of the areas that we're going to maybe play with here. Go grab a different brush. See if that's what we want. That is in fact what we want. So I was thinking that, you know, we might, I'm actually going to reduce the opacity of this guy just so that we can kind of visualize what will happen here. So we'll imagine maybe that the, that the water will kind of just kiss the bottom of that container. We might see some lights in here around the outside edge. That'll be like just a really nice way of having some refraction come through the water. In there, I imagine the kind of tentacle maybe coming up and wrapping around on the glass here, whatever it looks like. All right, and just kind of disappearing underneath. Maybe there's some more of that in here. Right, maybe even something wrapping around on this side. Just to make it look like this guy is kind of messing around in there. We could even have one sneaking off this way. And so that's sort of what I'm thinking about. You know, if I'm designing a prop like this, I don't really want to be too dramatic all the time, right? Cover things up that would be interesting to know if you were the art director of the client, right? But so I'm trying to keep it off to the side a little bit here and there. So food for thought. The breakage would maybe be good. I like the asymmetry idea of the breakage. So it could be that the top portion up in here, these panes are maybe broken. And then the frame is kind of popped open here, right? And then something like that here. You know, this whole thing could even be lifted up and broken in there. I kind of want one of the pieces to feel like it's been bent outwards, and then we can have the glass kind of shattered from there. Even this guy could be broken. Or maybe we'll leave that one kind of intact, and then we'll just have a few broken shards on this edge. Kind of bend that up this way. Maybe we'll have some kind of slime sticking off of it, or kind of gooey forms kind of dripping down the glass on this side. And then the hole will be open, so these back panels, this is the back panel set that I drew through the truncated icosahedron. So we can maybe see those through the opening in that one there. And then, I mean, this whole thing can have water in it and feel like it was sort of like a liquid containment unit, but now that this thing is broken out of it, maybe that liquid just sort of sits at a level here, right inside of that. And we just see the top of it, and then we can imagine there's going to be a lot of like splash direction from where it kind of came out and kind of spilled over into the containment unit, or into the base of the containment unit anyway. So kind of rough that in. If we were to have any contraption that would be powering the sphere, it might be good to see it, right? One of my first ideas was to maybe have it kind of overlapping in the back there, but we can't see too much of that, and I'm not sure that would be totally clear. So one of my ideas was to maybe have something come out of the top here, and then the hoses and whatever could come into that. Not sure though. It might even be a case of the mechanical things or the technology that come out of this might even come out of the intersections on this thing, and maybe they're just a smaller sort of, almost look like a fuel cell or something. I kind of like that idea better, because if we have the silhouette of this thing, remember what we did in the in here, it's kind of nice to just have that be a ball shape. So likely client would have signed off on that aspect of it, so I think I might just keep that at that point. And so I think that opting for these little power cell dealies will probably be a better call for us. So when you mean lights, do you mean something like light orbs or ball lightning? No, I mean actual light sources, right, where they're lighting up the container. There's water dripping off the side underneath. Well, it just depends on how recent it was, right? I'd probably rather have slime sort of coming off of that than water dripping, because it looks like it's settled, right? And so it would maybe indicate that there's been some time that passed. So we have that idea, so we can kind of just start to rough out where those things might be. And even then, I don't know. I'm not completely convinced by even that. So it might be just some subtle detail in the framing as well, and a lot of the tech maybe is based in the floor. Excuse me. All right, let's get some other line work going on in there. That's sort of our sketch idea. So I'm gonna lock that just because I don't want to keep painting that layer. That's just a rough idea layer. And come back in here. We'll go sphere, forward, sphere back. It's always good to name your layers so you know what it is you're looking at. That's our reference. That's our sketch. Thumb and thumbs brief. All right. So let's start another one called rings. If I can spell rings correctly. There we go. Okay. So let's try and get summation of what we saw before. I kill the fill on that and then just turn my stroke to black. And I'll probably make it a little bit less thick than that because I'm just looking for the line edge rather than any sort of thick ring. So that's pretty close. We can just grab this and then kind of move that into place. If it seems to be a little bit more open than I want it to be, then I can just move that around till it fits my original drawing. And then I will copy and paste that just because it's already a ring, and then I can move that bad boy, whoops, move that guy down, and then just scale him up. And then I'll grab this and pull that up a little bit like so, and this a little bit down like so. Okay, so we've got those guys, and then we can go and do any sort of erasing we need to do. So I'm just gonna kind of gonna clip just this edge. I'm gonna keep that inside edge because that looks like a good thickness for the rim of the ring. And I'm just going to connect the dots between those. So let's turn off the original. There we go. And with those rings, I can go in with a mask and then just mask out the stuff on the other side. We might actually be able to see some of that. It's actually, oops. We might be able to see some of the rings on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mask out areas that I think are maybe not going to make it through, like on any of the frame portions of this guy. And with that, what you might think is like, oh well, I'll maybe also mask out the bottom of the sphere itself, but it might be nice to see that move down in underneath the water and refract a little bit. So I might keep that. Sphere back, I am just going to erase some of the stuff that overlaps in there. One of those things kind of got away on us. That's fine. So it's set up for us in there. If I were, you know, being if I wanted to kind of be drawing something within that tank and I did want to kind of do it on both sides, then that's when you can use your symmetry tool, right? So I'm going to turn my symmetry tool on and then have that just run down the middle of those things. And you'll know if your bottom line layer, like this ring, is off center, because when you draw, you're trying to make things symmetrical, right? You'll notice if they're too close or too far, say from the icosahedron. So you just have to shift that around. So we could get something on this side, something on this side. And those things are going to kind of fold up on us as they move around. So that's sort of what I was thinking, just in a very rough way, where those lights could go, right? So let's start a new layer. And we'll keep it about that size of a light as we go around. Keep it about that distance from each other. That one was a little bit wonky. So they're going to start to get a little bit closer together and compressed before they disappear around the side there. So that'll work. Any of the details now on the panels on the outside are where we could still use this asymmetry tool. So I might get something that runs down this way. You can see it's not quite perfect, but that's okay. I might have something where they've kind of like bolted this thing into place like a fastener. So I always tell my students to make sure that they transition from certain shapes to other overlapped shapes. Otherwise things look very unnatural, like they're just kind of jammed together. So that might be an opportunity for us. Any concept art competitions? Do I ever? No, I'm pretty busy for that stuff. Why don't you apply? Because I actually have a job. You youngsters out there should definitely be getting involved in that stuff. You get that portfolio together and get in there. I think that's going to be a good place for the juniors to learn. So we can have kind of this recessed element in there with bolt that maybe kind of comes down inside of that. Kind of thinking about that in there. We might even have one in the middle here, why not? So I'll use that asymmetry once again to kind of create that shape. Goes into the back there. And then if we're going sort of like panel to panel, we might have another one that we just barely see over here as it's sticking out. And then so we see that this guy over here, well, on this side, on the right hand side, is sticking off of the frame a little bit. I can always just, when I turn my symmetry off, I can grab that and move it back in. So not too big of a deal in there. So I am going to do that now. I'm going to turn my symmetry off. And just grab that guy and move him back in. Right. So maybe what we'll think of doing is, I'm thinking again of that transition. It might be just something that has a crack in it, right? Sometimes when you bolt into concrete and things have had force applied to them, they'll sometimes just crack even though they're still secured, right? So we might just have some of that here and there. All right. So yeah, we just got kind of like a nice start to that. That's our ring layer. And drop that down, preserve the mask still, and it's golden. Okay, yeah, so it's a good start. We can start getting some of the details in here. So at this point, I am going to collapse everything in the drawing layer. Oh, maybe I'll just still work on the forward sphere actually. And so I'm thinking about the volume of these struts. Are they going to be sort of peaked? Are they going to be rounded? It will depend on the kind of aesthetic that you're after. It might be nice to give the viewer a sense of reinforcement that it is more of like a triangular form, because there's a lot of geometry or like straight edge geometry in this piece so far. So I might just kind of go through and draw those peaked shapes in between each strut. It's a pretty quick way to kind of just create this sense of volume. At least a roadmap for us to finish drawing the rest of it. There we go. So that's feeling a little bit better to me. We could go in there and start to kind of think about each one of those corners being reinforced, for instance, right? That might be a detail I save for later if I'm not totally convinced by the time I kind of get further into the drawing. But that's feeling pretty good to me. Yeah. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'll probably kind of rough out where the tentacles are. I kind of still feel like I'd like cables running into the water in a way, or at least running up to ports in the side, right? We could have a port here that has sort of like a collar on it that these big cables maybe are running to and from, so that kind of runs off of that. We could have something that kind of sneaks around the floor that way. Might feel a little bit strange to have things just running into the water. Curious. Lots of different things we could do there. I kind of like this idea of these cables running out of that. So actually a quick way to work with building cables, because we're going to be dealing with like a symmetry or at least a diameter similarity in the cable as it kind of moves around, is to use a hard round brush as a, we'll just kind of back that up. hard round brush as a, let's kind of erase this guy, as a guide. So we've got sphere forward. Now let's go cables. If I go into my hard round, at least if that cable is staying a very similar size as it moves up out of the machine, I can just do something like this, right? The diameter is going to stay the same, and then I can always drop the opacity on that, and then I can trace along those edges, right? Which could be pretty helpful to us. There's a little bit of shakiness in that line that I'm drawing, so I could turn on some smoothing in Photoshop to get that to feel a little more curvilinear, right? So thinking about that, maybe we make one of these things smaller in the back and it connects here and then comes out and then snakes along the floor out of there. Depending on sort of the angle we want, maybe there's another one over on this side that comes out of the machine and does a similar thing. Kind of thinking of perspective as this thing snakes away. And then we'll make that similar size cable here. And then we can have that coming out that way. So let's drop the opacity on those. And then we'll call this cable guide. And then these will be the actual cables. And then I'll just grab a different brush. So I've still got the smoothing on because I do want to kind of have these lines be a little bit more uniform. And smooth is a really good way to do that. Whoops. So that's one cable. We won't worry about the attachment there. We're just going to draw the lines for now. This is where, if you're using a tablet, it's a little bit easier if you're used to drawing on a tablet instead of a Cintiq or a digitizer with a screen, because my hand gets in the way of where it's the stroke is supposed to go. So sometimes I got to go a little bit slower to make sure that I'm following the line appropriately. So we got that bad boy there. What if you had one of the tentacles coming from the inside of the sphere, breaking the glass? It could be cool as well. Poor trapped octopus. Yeah, that could work. Or it could be like the like Carrion, which we were playing when we started this, where it can kind of tear itself into chunks, or like it was kind of almost like it gave birth to itself so that it could get smaller, and then it could go eat itself. It's so super grotesque in there. This looks great though. Can't wait to see how it turns out. Excellent. Have you ever done freelancing gigs with Naughty Dog or Insomniac? I have not. Get that in there. So I'm still visualizing where these lines are coming and going from. So I want this to feel like it's snaking away from us. So I'm going to go for some overlaps here. My hand is super shaky from the coffee I've drank today. It's not looking too bad. Photoshop's doing its best to try and keep it straight. Okay, so we've got a good first pass. I am going to turn down the smoothing though, and I'm going to look for opportunities to embellish the curves a little bit more to keep them on point. So if this thing is coming into, let's imagine we can see the port that it's moving into there, then I want to kind of mimic those shapes as they round. And then where it would straighten up, we would have a line there. Where it would start to curve back around, we'd have a line there, right? So depending on how we think this is going to go. Like, because it could also snake this way instead, and then really start to round at that point. But if it's going to kind of curve back this way, we almost have to really pull it back so that the diameter stays the way it should. Something like that. A lot of this may change, right? But at least this is going to be a good sort of indicator of where the volume is traveling to and from, so that if I do decide to add more detail later, I'm not spending time figuring out what I meant by some of these strokes. Because if it's just two outlines, a lot of the time you can't tell what's going on, right? So it is important to make sure that you can leave visual notes for yourself even, right? That one, we'll get this one in here. I'm so used to Procreate now with drawing, because if you hold a curve, it will straighten it. And I keep expecting it to straighten it or unify it, but it doesn't do that. Guys at Procreate better hurry up and make a desktop app, and for PC as well. I don't want to have to buy a Mac again. Not that I don't like Macs, it's just I don't have one right now and I don't want to buy another one. So there we go. Let's turn off our cable guides. And, you know, it was, in terms of modeling something like that through drawing, it's pretty easy to do, instead of kind of making it a hand-drawn thing that might be a bit shaky or inconsistent in the size. So that's a good first stab at it. I'll have to get in here and figure out what my collars will be, right? Sort of like the hose will probably have some sort of metal clamp with these. I don't know if you've seen, you know, when fuel trucks fill up a gas station, they have these big sort of collars on the ends of the hoses that they clamp together. So obviously this super flammable explosive chemical doesn't spill out into the world. So I'd want something like that in there. Okay. And the uniformity of that, I'm planning on kind of contrasting a little bit with the tentacle, which will be tapered, right? So it'll almost look like these tentacles are flowing out from this, but then we'll be able to see this tentacle maybe emerge from it. And it could be that the tentacle is still like, maybe it's kind of hooked inside the hole, which could be cool. So that's feeling pretty good. At this point, I think the damage will be the next step, or the tentacle itself. The reason I maybe want to go with the damage first is then I can start to plan where that tentacle will go. Also, the prop is more important than the character, right? Which is always, something to catch yourself on. So I find myself sometimes doing that. It's like, oh, I'm having fun. Oh, that's not the point. I'm having to make an asset here. Hello, welcome. You need the energy drink potions you can get online. They are that strong. You can only take a small portion of 20. I'm too old for that. This coffee gives me heart palpitations. And also, I hate the taste of energy drinks. Ugh. Like Red Bull, thumbs down. If you like it, good for you. I don't like it. How many spoonfuls of coffee do I put in? I don't measure it. I just pour in half of the coffee tub. I don't drink drip coffee. I drink espresso. So my machine will give 2 doses, 2 shots. Well, I use 2 shots. And when I don't want that, I have pre-ground espresso that I use 2 shots of decaf. But decaf dries out a lot. Anyway, coffee geek stuff. And then sometimes I just have an espresso, or I build myself a flat white, a cappuccino, depending on how much milk or foam I want. That's the benefit of having a coffee machine at home like that, an espresso machine. Anyway. Resident Evil, I mean, what are they really themed in terms of the recipe though? Or is it just that Capcom and Nintendo threw their pictures on a can? Huh. They probably color the same recipe. If you can call that a recipe, man. To me, it just feels like chemicals. But I suppose that's what caffeine is. All right. So we're going to bust up this cage, but I don't want to lose the original shape in case my busting up of the cage goes south, right? And it's not something that I want to keep. So sphere forward is the one we're going to be affecting. So I'm going to pull that down into a new layer. And then I'm going to lock that one. And so I can't mess around with it. I'll just turn that off. And then I can go as well. Actually, let's lock the new one, and lock the old one. And we'll keep the new one. That's the one we're going to break. So when planning this, sort of my idea is there has to be enough room for this thing to have broken out of this space. These individual panes would probably have to be their own piece of glass or plastic, Lexan, whatever it is, right? I want them to shatter because I want it to seem broken. But do I want to affect any of the other hex shapes? That's the question, right? If it was something that I felt like the force of this thing pushed through one piece, I'd feel like we maybe get another broken pane here or there, but not just the whole thing shattered, right? So I am going to nuke this one, but I feel like it might be nice to have maybe a crack on this one, which I'm also thinking of having maybe a weak light coming down from here that will bounce off of that. So I'll see the crack maybe in the reflection of that pane. So, in terms of concept art, planning your art, this is sometimes what will happen is you'll kind of project into future parts of the workflow so that you can imagine what that'll look like to see if that effect will really sell what it is you're going for, right? Rather than just kind of working through it, which is not a bad way of working, but sometimes you can miss out on opportunities, or you can paint yourself into a corner, so to speak, where it's just like, oh, I have to go back and paint a whole bunch of other things to get this to read better, right? If I didn't think far enough ahead. So it's sort of planning and design. Think about old illustrators that would use gouache, watercolor, oil paint, acrylics. They don't get to Control Z or Z, whatever the hell you want to call it, they get to repaint it all. So is for them, that immediacy of the medium made it a necessity to plan, right? And so, as you're drawing, you sort of like imagine into the future, what can that look like? What can that look like? And then you can get a lot of that information back in. So by the end. I think it's just color engineering flavor, but the artwork and some of those energy drinks is very cool. Yeah, I mean, it's marketing, right? Straight up marketing. There are, say, a friend of mine is really into speakers. And, there's certain speaker companies he thinks are inferior, but they market it better. I'm not going to say which ones, but it is true. You can get people buying things. Look at infamous celebrities that have no skill, right? They're good at marketing themselves. Again, those shall remain nameless. So it is all about that. You can have an amazing product, or you be an amazing artist, and if nobody knows about you, then you sit there in your obscurity, unknown, right? So that's how I think a lot of these companies are successful, is they just spend a ton of money on marketing. Video games, for instance, you'll have some games, depending on how big they are, some AAA, like if you're going to see something like even like a Grand Theft Auto, for instance, the money they're going to pour into marketing is not trivial. It is a massive amount. In some games, it will maybe even eclipse, maybe eclipse. I'm not sure they would ever get to that point, but it will be such a vast amount of money because they need to get people to know about it, right? So they're paying the dev team to build it, then they have to pay everybody to know about it, so that they buy it. And then the ticket price for games now is sort of obviously climbing up, but then that's where they make their money. So they want to net a lot of money. The gross is going to be a lot higher, but they have to pay for their marketing at that point. So anyway, no, I wouldn't say it's twice. It can eclipse and get up there, but I wouldn't say that it's twice. Sometimes there have been games that I've worked on that have been canceled because they don't want to put forward the marketing money because they don't think they'll make it back, and so the game gets canceled, right? So that's pretty sad, of course, if you spent any amount of time working on a title, but it's up there. It's up there. It is different though. Like there'll be sort of indie darlings like Stardew Valley that kind of get grassroots momentum, and then that, I think for the most part, is a one-man show. I think his name was Sean. I can't remember his name. And now he's built that game on for Switch and PC and cell phones and consoles, and I think if it was just him or even a couple of people, he's making some pretty serious bank without having sold a ton of marketing on that. And then you'll get, of course, the astroturfing, what they call it, with big studios that will go onto places like Reddit, and they'll post like, oh hey, look at this, and it's something related to one of their IPs that they're about to release, and so that's always looked upon with shame. But if they hide it well enough and what happens, then they'll attack that market as well, because it's free at that point, relatively free. They'll have to pay somebody to actually go and do that stuff, but that's why they pay influencers, right? So let's say we all had a product and we want to make it, get a lot of eyes on the product. You pay somebody that has millions of followers on Instagram, for instance, to sling your drink or your clothes or whatever, to makeup, then you get all those eyes on your product. So they're going to pay that influencer a ton of money. That's just that's a marketing channel, right? So there you go, right? It's all about kind of the marketing in a way, which can sometimes be a little bit depressing, but don't let it get you down. That's just the way it is. Okay, so let's stay on topic here. I'm gonna remove these struts to the corners just to open that space up a hint. I feel like these back struts are going to be good to break this nice soft edge to kind of bend those up. So I mean, even from here we could get that raised up to there, and then this could be, I wouldn't want to kind of make that a tangent out this way. I kind of want to feel like it blew up, it exploded outward. So maybe it starts bending here, and then we go to here. So I'm using the shift click a lot to kind of make this look better. I'll kind of get that popped off there. And then this corner piece here can be broken up that way. We can even have this guy kind of snapped that edge. There. So I'll just erase this and that. And then we can maybe get a little bit of this guy broken as well. So this stuff could be kind of hanging out this way. So I'll probably shatter that back piece now, because I do want the silhouette to feel, now that it's been kind of broken. Although that, we can see the inside of the icosahedron, right? You can see those original panes in there, so those would be the things that are broken. So I'm going to go back to my layer, and I'm going to kind of use that backdrop to have this guy be shattered to that point. And then this one will maybe remain intact back there. The rest of that will be broken. So let's turn that off. Oh, we moved it. Oops. There we go. I'll have to push this guy back down. In there. There we go. Okay, let's try that again. So maybe we'll have this guy be shattered to there. This frame can kind of be broken up to that point, and then this back one can be shattered. I'm going to work on the shatter shapes on that a little bit more once I get to it, but I kind of want to just get the sense of that for right now. And then I'll have to go to sphere back, and I'll just erase that shattered portion of it back there. Okay, so thinking about the way we're seeing this shape, we're looking down, almost like the horizon line that might be kind of cutting across here somewhere. Whoops. Somewhere like this. Because we're just able to see down into the space where the icosahedron is sitting. So we know we're looking down beyond or below the horizon there. And then we're looking up above it, obviously beyond, up above the container, which I'm not going to start to illustrate the whole thing. It can be a trap. Sometimes you think, oh, well, I'm just going to make a full illustration of this thing. Sometimes you do. Sometimes if you're just working on and you just have time to work on the prop, then that's what you pay attention to. So, all right. So we got kind of like a rough of the damage here. I'm going to make a copy of the back, do the same thing. I'm going to throw that down by the ref with the other locked copy. And I'm going to just lock that guy as well. And we can put both of those things, maybe all three of those things. Heck, let's put all of these guys down here into a folder, which is our process folder. Excuse me. And then we can just kind of leave those guys off and turn these on when we need to. And I'll just label that red. There we go. There, green zombie bag of blood as well. Wow, gross. People do freak out with the red blood bag for some reason. Probably twice. Marketing is really helpful, but then again, random success can be found and explode like PUBG. Battle Royale literally took off from there. Yeah, it did. It's an exciting kind of take on shooters, right? Because it's just so stale for so long, where it would just be, you know, some permutation of team deathmatch and more of an arena, right? So all the way back to the qualities of Doom and Quake, Unreal. To something that kind of expanded into larger battlefields like Battlefield, right? 1942, and then everything that spawned from there. But then it's just like those games came out with different sort of aesthetic skins with different, you know, eras of war or futuristic things, that kind of stuff. But, you know, there was no real gameplay change other than, you know, you'd capture the point or hold the point or push forward, that kind of thing. So the PUBG idea, Battle Royale, was pretty refreshing. Yeah, I was excited for PUBG. And it's super popular. It for me as a game dev, and you know, somebody that likes shooters, I really did feel like PUBG was built by a modder, which it was. There were some elements of that game that were very rough around the corner, and I think that's why you see success in something like after a while, right? PUBG had that space all to itself forever. And then finally people caught up, and that's Fortnite's success. I bought Fortnite because of the original game. Like, I bought Fortnite, and enough. Well, yeah, it was called Fortnite. That's when you would do the base building, and the zombie hordes would kind of push, and you'd keep them at bay. And then they built that little. I remember they released a little BR. A mod, and it was just like, okay, this is actually well made, right? As opposed to the kind of really modern indie game quality of PUBG. And then it was just a matter of time, and you got other kind of mimics coming through, and then something like Activision finally got on it with Warzone. And that's, you know, I think a better representation of the quality of how you can build a game. But it's still like PUBG is still, like, you know, very popular. Not as probably as popular as it was, because there's all these other competitors out there. But anyway, yeah, it's definitely interesting how that can happen. So it can happen. It just has to be a compelling idea. But there are plenty of games out there that are pretty cool as indie games that don't really see the light of day, just because they haven't got eyes on, or you know, they may have released under the shadow of some massive release, which they get pushed to the side. So even when you're releasing a game, say on just Steam or EGS or whatever, you, if you're going to get hosted by, like, in the new games, sometimes you can get stomped. You see this a lot in mobile games. The release windows will always kind of try and be built around other releases if they feel like they're not going to get the sort of what am I trying to say? Not hosting, but featured, right? And so some game releases in console land, even in AAA, will offset sometimes. I mean, the big guys like, say, Rockstar, they'll just release because they're going to be the big one, right? So they don't have to worry about it as much. But it's always been an interesting conversation when I've worked with different studios of like, oh, well, we're trying to hit this window, because you can try and span your window, your launch window out further, but you have to pay all those people that are on staff every minute of every day of the workday, right? So it can get quite expensive if you wait. So, which is rough. I think you'll see that in film and TV as well. I mean, film specifically because, you know, like, say, I'm sure they spent a ton of money on the new Top Gun, and they aren't going to release it until theaters are kind of more widely open, so they can get that money instead of going on demand, right? So it's like, yeah. Anyway, it's super interesting the way things are now because of COVID, but oh, I drew that line right through. There we go. But yeah, I mean, it's just smaller films as well. Limited run films are never going to make as much as Hollywood blockbusters because they don't have the marketing, right? And that's super sad, but it's the way it is. Anyway. Your old glasses make you loaf though? Laugh though. Okay, well, interesting. The glasses make you laugh. I love Fortnite, hate the style, but it's great. You guys like and enjoy it though. I wasn't a huge fan. I wasn't a huge fan of the BR, to be honest. The original game seemed like fun co-op to me, more so than the BR did, but I like that they put the polish into it. So yeah. Let's erase these things. I'm gonna just clean up some of this stuff because you saw I kind of drew the horizon line in there. So we're pretty good to go on that. I think now we could get into, actually I am gonna clean up a little bit of the damage in there. It's getting a bit squirrely on us. So I'm just gonna kind of go and knock some of that out. We'll get rid of this pane because I think that will be what's broken. And then we can have some shattered glass in there. And we can even have kind of like a crack spidering out from that. I'll use some thicker line up on top just so that we can help indicate that volume in there. Okay. Okay, now we're gonna just combine the sphere front and back. And then we'll combine. I'm not going to combine cables yet, but I will go into cables and or rings, and I'm going to get into the mask. Just mask some of those things out so that we can't see them through the piping. So that makes it a little bit more solid. Then our cables, I am going to just erase those elements that I drew before in there. So that'll be cracked. And get that kind of spidering off of there. They make me look like a dad. Yeah, well, I am definitely old enough to be a dad. Feeling for some of the colors you might gravitate towards. Nope, I'm not yet. Rid of those guys. Kind of make the ends of those things maybe a bit more ragged so it looks like they broke open. Or just kind of cut. Okay, let's get into some of the tentacle drawing. So that's our sort of original. So I don't mind that. I think I can riff on that. I'm gonna get rid of that guy. It's a really rough drawing. Oh, I undid my grouping there. That's fun though. I'll put them all in a layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop the opacity of everything in there, right? So I can kind of just focus on where the tentacle will go on its own layer here. Thanks for the follow. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of the water work as well. So if this guy's splashing around, I'm thinking maybe we get the water kind of touching up against this edge here, just so that those lights will be buried underneath, well, sunken underneath the water at that point. So we get little ripples. making these ripples feel a little bit turbulent, like it's splashed around in there. It's not just still. When you finish this prop, are you going to design a room for it to go in, like a stage design of sorts? So like a interior room design. That's definitely something you can do. I'm going to be moving on to other things, but if you're into doing it, then I invite you to hit that up. It can be definitely a part of the process, right, of getting those things a place to live. But we're doing just prop design, right? So when you're doing prop design, we would do something like that. If you're doing environment design, you'd probably do the entire room. It might be something that would accompany this, but again, just keep things moving along. We'll switch it up after we're done this. So the water kind of coming around, and let's get some compression of those little waveforms in there. Maybe some little guys, some little noise. So some of this is going to have to move out of the way, right? We know that because the tentacles will be coming out of that. And these are just demarcations of where the waves will go. When I render more of this, those will be clearer or refractive. I might even get rid of some, right? But I want to kind of think about where those things are going. So we got our waves. Let's actually call it that, water. And then these can be our tentacles. So I can do a very similar thing where I'm kind of using the brush to kind of mass forms like this, right? So I can use the taper on it. I mean, the pen pressure thing is not super ideal here, but at the same time, it almost starts to look like a like an earthworm, which I like. So I can keep that, or I can erase into it, right? There's a nice rhythm to it in any case. I can keep. This guy over here, I think we might be able to have him come out from behind just so we get a nice overlap in there. Or might even just be coming out of that corner. I can turn on some smoothing here if I want some help. And then I can just drop that opacity down. It could be that we erase this one in here, and let's get rid of that smoothing. We could just have this little eye peeking up instead, because I don't want to use that much real estate. So something maybe that kind of just pokes up there with an eye in it. We might have a little bit of a smaller tentacle kind of peek up over that. Minimal overlap, right? Something like that feels pretty good. Yeah, I'm just gonna get a just clean overlap on that guy though. Right. Yeah. So we can do the same thing. We can just drop the opacity on that even more, and then start tentacle line, tent line, short. These can be traditional. They could be, maybe you put different kind of tentacle tips on them so it doesn't look like just like, hey, we caught an octopus. Make it feel like an alien. How do you have a problem with exercising during the day when you are seated all the time? Just got to make time for it, right? It's just something that, definitely COVID's made it difficult because, the contact you'd get with people at the gym or those places are closed. I get outside, go for walks if I can, and so stretch, right? Make sure you're doing that stuff. I have a personal trainer once a week, so that's sometimes, depending on how busy it is, that might be the only exercise I get, which is not a good thing, right? You just got to make sure you got to get out there. How do you deal with, basically you're asking work-life balance, and I guess you're convincing your family members. I think all you can do is tell people what's important to you. If they are on board with it, they're on board with it. If they're not, then, that's up to them. But it's different for every person, so I can't really say what you should be doing. But as long as you believe in what you're doing, then that's all you can ask for, right? Okay, let's get a little bit closer with this stuff because I don't want my line work to be too loose. So I think I'm gonna give this guy a little kind of gross little kind of lumps, and maybe he has eyeballs on his tentacles, right? So I can kind of start to draw those things, and that layer underneath is just going to be a guide for me. So we'll go with almost like a goat eye here. And I think even then I'm going to put stuff like teeth on them. Right. A little bit of an homage to Carrion. but I'm going to make mine a little bit more of like a closed form rather than this kind of nondescript biomorphic thing. Give a really big eye kind of over the top there that's kind of sticking up out of a socket. And this just helps save it from being just an octopus, right? Just make it visceral and gross. Kind of working with as much kind of overlap as I can in some of these things. These lines are really good for contour, right? Just give us a sense of contour in a piece like this. You can think of things, you know, if you want to make it super visceral, just teeth, spiny elements. You know, we might add that. It might be kind of like these almost not porcupine quills, but these really kind of sharp spines that maybe stick up off of this guy. Almost like hair, right? But I want it to be more kind of dangerous, I guess, than that. Could even be like this is almost like a mouth, and then the tongue's coming out. So if you're unfamiliar with maybe what a tongue looks like, that could be something that you go look up. And you get almost like these little taste bud things coming off of them. Let's get like a little face out of there too. Personal trainer, yeah, I do. I do indeed. It's very good to have somebody lead you through an exercise because you can't be lazy about it. Forget the name of it. That'd be interesting though. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be almost like a convention with that kind of thing. It's like humans are going to use examples of things that they're afraid of and that creep them out in horror movies and that kind of thing a lot. So I have no doubts that it's been used before. Likely where I'm referencing it from is just sort of like that memory, right? gonna kind of the underside of a tongue right there is what I'm going for here. Is just kind of that veiny, slick look. So trying to make it inspired by something rather than just going in and just building random shapes, right? It's gonna feel better. This little head might be a good one to play with. We could go with octopus eyes. Maybe it's going to be sort of this central sort of hub of eyes, right? That looks maybe a bit mutated or something. There might be kind of like a central eye. And then a little kind of hive or group of other little eyes in there. To try and make it as asymmetrical as possible. It's almost got like gills or something. As aliens do. Splinter. Splinter. It sounds familiar. Hey Brandon, love the prop design so far. Excited to see when it starts to get colored. I got 2 questions for you. What made you want to work with CG Spectrum, and are you still doing other freelance concept work on top of teaching at CGS? Work with CG Spectrum. I wanted a bit of a break from studio work, as I had been doing it for quite a while, teaching was something completely new to me, and so it was a cool experience to kind of just push myself to do something outside of my comfort zone and make a change. So that's sort of how I came into it. And do I freelance concept work on top of teaching? I do. I have done. Currently, I'm working on a couple of my own projects, which shall remain nameless, but a couple of entertainment projects with some business partners of mine. So that takes up a majority of my time outside of the school, obviously. But I definitely am still active, working in the industry. A lot of our mentors still work, and that's sort of the nice thing about CG Spectrum is a lot of our mentors are still working in the industry, both on their own projects and for studios or clients, whatever it may be. Good question though. I'll get rid of this little line in there. I want him to kind of feel like he has some volume moving out into the water. and then coming close towards us and kind of clipping at this edge. Some of this line work needs to be a bit more. I want to make him feel like he's got a big lower lip. It's like a parrotfish. I kind of want to make him feel like a blob, though. Like spill out into this sort of sloppy shape in there. That feels pretty cool. Any art books for anatomy and figure drawing that you recommend? Some of my favorites are the Andrew Loomis books. They're just nice and simple and give you a good kind of overview of what the human figure looks like. A little bit of the style of Loomis is definitely from his era of illustration, which I'd say it's like the 50s, 60s. But still, all of the observations in those in his figure drawing books remain, I think, very very useful to students. So that's definitely one you could look at. There is a book, it's a Japanese book that's not really easy to find. I found it actually in a bookstore in Hiroshima when I was in Japan. And fantastic art book. I'll try and remember that for the next stream. Try and remember to ask me, and I'll see if I can chase down the name for you. But the Loomis stuff is available, and I think is super useful. One of my other favorites, I think, is maybe more technically useful, is Anatomy for Sculptors. Anatomy for Sculptors. And that's by, I think you say his name is Oldaris. And it's for 3D modelers, I think, and even just traditional media sculptors. But that one is really good to see the kind of mechanics of the body, see how things work, where the structures are, what the forms and like the sculptural forms are. And so that one would be, I think, a worthy addition to the old book shelf. There's tons of drawing books out there. You can get Bridgman, you can get Animal Anatomy for Artists is a good book for animal stuff. What else am I not seeing? Yeah, I think those are pretty good. I mean, at some point you're just going to be learning the same principles, so yeah, I'd check those out. Can't wait to completion of your project. Have to leap. Keep an eye on the gaming world for that. Has there ever been a horror movie that really scared you? I'm not a huge fan of horror movies because of the jump scare. I mean, I'm just waiting for it and I know what happens and then I start to predict it. And I just don't like the anxiety of it. But in terms of horror movies, I'm kind of more into like the thriller end of things. Like for me, the kind of, I guess more of like something like The Exorcist is a horror movie that I like supernatural demon stuff. The Exorcist 3, I believe, like one of my favorite scenes is when the old lady is like you get an upshot, sort of like a medium close shot of the nurse working in her office, really high ceilings, old hospital, and then you just see all of a sudden this old lady crawling on the ceiling and she looks down at her. The first, I haven't seen the new It, but the first It film that came out a couple of years ago, that one was really good. Like there's a scene in the library where the kid goes in to kind of do some research, I guess, and he finds out a little bit about Pennywise and the curse. And the old lady, I don't know if you notice it. I think a lot of people do, but she's standing in there, and she is sort of in out of focus in the back. But then you just see her head turn, and she smiles with really wide eyes, and you can kind of barely make it out. It's like that kind of stuff creeps me out. I love that. So that film was pretty good for me in terms of the creepiness aspect. But teen slashers, stuff like Halloween, Freddy Krueger, it's not for me. Not to say it's not good, it's just not my vibe. I like more of the kind of subtle creepiness. I mean, it gets pretty over the top, but I think that you get some of that stuff in there. In terms of like thrilling movies, I love stuff like Aliens, although I didn't like Prometheus, and the second version of Prometheus, whatever that was called. It's too much like a comedy of errors in the beginning for me to really get into it. But whatever. Freaked out by aliens and other things. The new It movie is great. 740. I don't know how I feel about that water. I know about those. We have some here. I just don't like. How long has that water been sitting in that thing? Is it spraying in my eyes? Like, I don't know. Maybe it's safe. I just always thought like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need a shower when I'm watching a film. Have you ever wanted to do design work for movies or just video games? Film, one of the things that I like doing in my personal work is more stylized work. In film, it happens, but rarely. Realism kind of bores me a little bit in terms of actually building something. So I was more inclined to stay in games because I like the kind of make-believe stylization that a lot of it affords. There's still obviously a lot of realistic stuff out there. I don't mind doing it, but games just seem to be a good place for it. Animation would be something like that, and it's a lot of hours when you work in these industries. So. And there was a pretty healthy game industry here, not so much film when I started, so that's another part of it. Locally, it was more game based, but the film industry kind of just blew up here way after, and then so it remains to be a pretty good place for film effects stuff. But yeah, not specifically. I mean, especially as I get older, I'm not that enamored by working and getting my name on things. Like once you see your name on stuff, it can be quite exciting. And as a junior artist, as a younger artist, that can be, and even a senior, it can be a really big driver. For me, it's not so much, right? I want to be creative and I want to do my thing. And so as I get older, I kind of want to focus more on my own deal than other people's work. Because you can't rely on other people forever, right? So it's good to get the experience, though, for sure. It's super necessary to be involved in places where they are making basically content for a large range of customers, because it's a lot of feedback. You learn how to get the feedback and how to kind of satisfy client groups, customer bases. It teaches you a lot. It's really good. But you can imagine that, say, an artist that's been around for a bit, they'll have different priorities than junior artists. So to each their own. But I would still say that for juniors, it's very important to get the experience. and some people just love being kind of like doing the artwork and being told what artwork to make. And in that case, working for clients is great because they have all of that stuff loaded up. They can't do it, so they make they look for people like us to do it, which is really good. Good for the pocketbook, you know what I mean? You had a hard time choosing between Loomis, Bridgman, and Hogarth for anatomy figure drawing. Yeah, I mean, all good, right? You're not gonna not learn about the body that way. Maybe you have money later, you pick up some of the other ones, or see if they're on sale ever. But all good, all good. Loomis has a lot of kind of visual representations of the like almost like figure. What am I trying to say? Drawing figures and sheets that you can follow, right? Whereas Bridgman is a pretty text heavy, kind of talking about the theory of it and whatnot. So it just depends on what you're after, but all good, needless to say. But I would say look at the anatomy for sculptors. It sounds like, oh, well, for sculptors, but we are creating three-dimensional things, or I hope we're trying to anyway. So those would be good places to look. So that book is really nice. Cool. So we're gonna start to wrap this up here, but you guys can see sort of if we get some of this stuff kind of cranking back up, what that is potentially going to look like. We can even throw our water back in. Let's actually turn our water down, right? And we'll have our little prop design in here. It's sometimes good to keep something like the water, or at the very least the tentacles, off of, like, don't collapse that down into the painting in case the client just wants to see the shape, right? Because then you can kind of call those things out separately. But there we go. We've gone from something that was a lot more rudimentary in the very beginning to something like this now in just under a couple hours there. So I mean, if you're following along or drawing your own piece, you can use some of those methods to kind of help you maybe with some hard surface stuff, and then getting into the maybe tentacles, right? And your alien that's bust loose. So cool. Thanks everybody for showing up to the stream. Always fun to do some arts and chat. So we'll be back on Monday with some life drawing stuff, and then we'll continue on with this. Depending on how time goes for me, I might do a little bit of work on it outside, but maybe not. Anyway, we'll see by the time we meet next, but we'll definitely be continuing on with this guy, maybe even wrapping it up. So look forward to that. Otherwise, have a great week, gang, and we will see you next time. Take care. Thanks.